2 days after people. Some of the world's most defenseless creatures face a world for which they are completely unprepared. There are 9 million dairy cows in the United States alone, and they're used to being milked 2 or 3 times a day. But now, the dairy is empty and the milking machines have been turned off.
Milk cows are incredibly dependent upon humans. As soon as we disappeared and they were off their schedule, their regular milking schedule, they'd be confused. When is someone going to come and get me and bring me into the milking parlor? When is someone going to bring me more food? They'd be mooing, vocalizing, trying to let us know that they need some attention.
While some will develop infections of the udder, the pain and discomfort most suffer will only be temporary.
Surprisingly, the vast majority of them would do what we call dry up. They would stop lactating. The milk that she retains in her udder would just absorb back into the body, and her system would tell her, hey, time to stop producing milk. That would take about 2 weeks.
But not all dairy cows are safe.
Probably the animals that would be under the most stress and would have the biggest problem if humans disappeared would be the baby calves, because they're incredibly vulnerable and dependent upon humans.
Baby calves had to be hand-fed by humans twice a day because their mothers had been conditioned to mass-produce milk and paid little attention to their young. Now, many adult cows are just as dependent on people for food.
If the cattle could not get feed, they would wander around, they would look bewildered, they'd push against the gates. If they couldn't get the gates open, which they probably wouldn't be able to, they'd eventually become weaker, they'd lie down, and eventually, without the feed, they would die.
"30 years after people. On land, most of the world's dairy cows have died out. Even those that found enough food on the farm or were able to escape their pens couldn't find a way to reproduce. In order to keep producing milk, dairy cows needed to be pregnant at least once a year. In the time of humans, this was frequently achieved through artificial insemination. Many dairy cows spent their whole lives without ever laying eyes on a bull. There were exceptions, and now these small pockets of surviving cows will begin a rapid evolutionary change that will take them back to the wild. Places like the plains of Colorado will make perfect grazing ground. Outside Denver, on the Colorado prairie, the descendants of domestic cattle have carved out a new way of life.
The future cattle would be a very, very different kind of animal than we see on the pastures and hillsides right now. It would be smaller, more fleet, more agile, able to escape from predators quite a bit more effectively. It would take on a lot of characteristics like deer.
Even more striking are the herds of bison on the prairie. Before man hunted them to near extinction, there were as many as 60 million of these massive beasts roaming America. By the 21st century, that population had dwindled to 350,000. Supremely fit for this terrain, 200 years without people has allowed their numbers to explode. Once again, the buffalo can roam.